everyone. It's another Friday and a super session coming up. So for those of you who are not familiar, we will be running this week, we'll be getting back to running a poll. So for those of you who want to immediately go to the QR reader, you've got it on the screen. For those who don't use that, you can go to slido.com and put in today's date under LM081021. We are today going to be running the questionnaire at the beginning and getting the answers. So it would be great if everyone's ready to go with that. As far as Slido is concerned, we'd also be taking questions and answers through Slido. So please do use the Q&A, and where possible, and if you want to own your question, please put your name on, and if appropriate, I will look to bring you in so that you can actually engage with Craig and have a bit of a discussion maybe around your question. We also will be running a feedback poll at the end through Slido, so please do take the time to give us feedback on today's session. We do it every time. We get only a small percentage of people who give us feedback, but it is really important. So without much ado, I think what we'll do is we'll look at today's questions for the poll. So please take your time to fill this in. Now, I've asked Craig, or in fact, Craig has volunteered, that if there's phrases here that certainly I will probably not understand, he'll give us a brief view on overview of the meanings. So let's have the first question then, please. In what role has your main framework experience been gained? As a framework operator, procuring authority, which is a client or an end user, a works or service provider, or give us a tick for no experience at all. Now, Craig, is there any further understanding you think to give behind that?
Just all I would want to point out, Howard, so thanks for inviting me in. I think for those on the call, framework operator and procuring authority can, of course, sometimes be one and the same. But indeed, sometimes they are not, where the framework operator may indeed be a separate entity to those channeling work through the framework. Okay.
Okay, so you have a choice of one of the four. Okay, let's move on to question 2, please, Abraham. Overall, do you believe that procuring authorities deliver works, services, aspirations through frameworks? So your choice is yes, no, partially, or no view.
I can add to this one as well, Howard.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, I think just to give this one some context, and of course, frameworks and framework operators tend to have a clear vision, or set of values or performance measures that they wish to deliver to. And of course, this is about projects as well, perhaps. So giving it the full view, do procuring authorities deliver on their aspirations?
Thanks, Craig. Let's move on to question 3, if we can, please, Abraham. Overall, do you believe that frameworks promote healthier suppliers and supply chains? So overall, do you believe that frameworks promote healthier suppliers and supply chains? It's a yes, no, partially, or you can have no view. Anything else you'd like to add to that one, Craig?
I think that one speaks for itself, Howard.
I think it does indeed. What you'll see at the top right hand, for those people who wondered, 4 people have completed the whole questionnaire so far. So some people have shot through it, Craig, so that's fine. So let's go to question 4. Some frameworks have operated a number of consecutive terms. Overall, do you believe that framework operators improve the value of reprocurements by maximizing soft market testing and securing client industry feedback? I think that one might need a bit of explanation, Craig.
Sure. Okay.
That's for
Well, look,
me.
and we'll get into we'll go back in time for those who aren't so familiar with frameworks later in the presentation. But there are frameworks out there, and frameworks tend to run for periods of time. And the modern framework's probably been around for somewhere like 20 years. So there's been opportunity for frameworks to be renewed. And what I'd like to know from people on the call is really, have they experienced an opportunity, and do they believe that framework operators, when they do come to re-procure and restart their framework for a fresh term, do they come to the market for a good quality market test, and do they get the feedback that really informs some sort of improvement?
Thanks, Craig. That explains it for me. Okay, let's move on to the next question, please, Abraham. This is the last of the questions. Overall, do you feel that existing frameworks have the flexibility to cater for these challenges and deliver their aspirations for work services? You've got, again, choice. Craig, do you want to elaborate anything more on that?
Yeah, I think we ran out of space on this one. I just wanted to give this one a bit of context, really. And I think, let's look at this one in the context of the current climate. So let's think pandemic, and let's think Brexit, because both of those events have most certainly exerted tension on our programmes, works, resources, availability and costs. So if viewers could respond to that in thinking about pandemic and Brexit, that would be really helpful.
I think you'd open Pandora's box on those two, Craig.
Yeah, well, we're not going to spend too much time on pandemic and Brexit. I think we're all pretty saturated with that stuff, aren't we?
We are, but we might come back to it a later point,
sure,
because of questions, etc. So I'm just going to take another minute or two. Everyone's now got the questions. We're up to 10, so I'll give it another minute or two. And then I think what we'll do is we'll put the answers up and we'll run through them. And I'm going to ask Craig to contribute. But if you want to continue to answer the questions as we go through, the poll will automatically adjust. It doesn't stop just because we're showing it. So we're up to about 13. So Abraham, let's take the answers to the first one. In what role has your main framework experience been gained? So, well, you can see, Craig, nearly half the room is a work service provider, and the second is no experience at all. So there are a number of people in the room today going to gain some quite insightful knowledge into the whole framework. So I don't know whether you want to make any comment on that.
Yeah, well, it's good to know who's in cyberspace. Quite frankly, Howard. So it allows me to maybe spend a little bit more time just walking through some of the framework concepts that works and service providers may be used to. So that's great, and it's great to see that we've got a framework operator too, and a procuring authority online too. So great to have you all on board.
I think we've covered the bases, but clearly no experience is an interesting one. Okay, question two. Oh, we've actually now got 50%. It's slightly changed. So okay. Half the rooms are work service providers. Okay, question two, please, Abraham. Overall, do you believe that procuring authorities deliver works, services, aspirations through frameworks? Partially seems to be the most popular here. Yes, almost a third. No view, another third almost. So, Craig, I don't know what you'd want to comment on that.
Probably not a massive surprise. I don't think, Howard, and some of these responses are going to dial into perhaps some of the observations that I've got later on in the presentation.
Yeah, hopefully we'll get some good questions. And indeed, because of partially, there'll be a number of us who want to understand a little bit more. Okay, question three, please. Overall, do you believe that frameworks promote healthier suppliers and supply chains? Well, the good news is, Craig, over 40% believe they do. But partially 30%. But interestingly, probably about 2 people say no, and another couples have no views. So any thoughts on did you expect to encounter that?
Well, in a way that it reflects, I guess, the second question, Howard, and the question is really driving towards delivery side on frameworks as opposed to achieving aspirations for procuring authorities. So that reflects that, and again, we've got quite a strong partial on that one. So, number of individuals sitting on the fence. Quite clearly, there's some providers on here that are clearly benefiting from being on a framework.
Yeah. Okay, let's have question 4, please, Abraham. Some frameworks have operated a number of consecutive terms. Overall, do you believe that framework operators improve the value of reprocurements by maximizing soft market testing and securing client industry feedback? Majority of the room has no view, but sorry, we could probably say a third yes and a third partially.
Okay, that's interesting, and I just wonder perhaps if that's making a suggestion to me, Howard, that maybe the individuals on here maybe haven't experienced reprocurements or perhaps been involved in some of the soft market testing before. So that's interesting.
Maybe the word reprocurements and soft market testing is something to focus on a bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, question 5, last one, please. Overall, do you feel that existing frameworks have the flexibility to cater for these challenges and deliver their aspirations for work and services? Partially is the largest, no view, 30% say, yes, 21. So there's some challenges ahead here, I think, in terms of people learning and understanding more and how it can work positively for them.
Yeah, thanks for that, everyone. Again, there's quite a balance towards partially. So it feels to me that we're talking to a group of individuals who have had some successes and seem to be coming up with further challenges. And I have to say, Howard, it's probably going to reflect some of the points I'm going to make later on.
Super. Well, I think this is the point where I hand over to you, Craig. So welcome and thanks so far for your contributions. So all I can ask now is for people to put any questions they have to Craig in the Slido if possible, because that's the place where we can centrally go. So any questions that you have, if you'd like to own them, we'll certainly look to bring you in. So Craig, over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to hopefully everyone's going to start to see that screen.
Yeah, I can see it. Everything's okay.
That's great. That's great. Well, listen, Howard, thank you very much. And I know Andrew's not on the call yet, Andrew Carpenter, but it's great to be invited onto this session. I'm going to enjoy to sort of walk you through some slides. Now, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint, as they say. I don't have a million and one words scribed onto them, so it's mostly visual, thankfully, for everyone. But I believe the slide pack will be available for sharing should anyone want to revisit it later on. Just by way of introduction, my name is Craig Finn. I'm the head of pre-construction at Henry Boot Construction. Now, what does that mean, head of pre-construction? Well, it's my responsibility to ensure that the Henry Boot Construction business has a healthy enough pipeline, and that pipeline is to be converted into healthy, sustainable workload. So I've got a little bit on my shoulders, but I've got a great team behind me, and as part of this, you'll get to see that frameworks and our association with frameworks, moreover public frameworks, are very much part of our DNA. But really what I want to do is hopefully stimulate some thoughts and prompt a discussion on creating value. So for all framework partners and value in the widest sense, not just financial for service providers and efficiencies for end users, but the community at large, the environment. And one thing that's at the forefront of my mind is about long-term health. And I think frameworks, while they evolve and operators learn, they do have a part to play in that. So I've called this creating value as a contractor in frameworks, but I just want you to look at it as value in the widest sense. And I'm going to stick to a very, very concise agenda, very simple agenda. So I'm going to, I think for in order for you to understand the Henry Boot position and my view, I think it's going to be important for you to understand the Henry Boot construction business. I'll spend a little bit of time on that one, and then certainly based on and because I've prepared the slides into a point, I'm glad there are some viewers today that perhaps would like a bit more orientation on what a framework actually is. Then I've got some slides on that. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to overlay what a framework is with the Henry Boot view on what good looks like. Okay, and what is it about those processes and dynamics of frameworks that we would like to see to create that healthy relationship and an environment. And then I'll just wrap up with a very brief slide on what we might see as the future of frameworks too. So thanks for spending a bit of time with me. Okay, so a bit of context here. 135 Henry Boots, that's the first phase of our new responsible business strategy. So 2021 is an exciting year for us with a bit of a major milestone. We're celebrating 135 years of trading with some serious enhancements to our responsible business strategy. So our phase one of this new responsible business strategy includes launch of our pathway to net zero carbon with short-term targets on directly controlled emissions, so scope 1 and 2 running between now and 2025. And we're going to look to accelerate our decarbonation program from 2026 to reach NZC by 2030. That's our target. And of course, the launch of our new equality and diversity inclusion strategy, which it's never really been more important as we target to retain and develop talent in these really very challenging times, and particularly when the re-emergence and bounce back of the industry is hitting hard at the moment, and with a big tension on resource skills, supply, and so forth. And in there's our community partnership plan, which is going to build on our history of community engagement and boosting our social value contribution. So 135 Henry Boot, I thought that was quite a powerful one to launch on because there's some really, really heavyweight industry issues wrapped up in those too. Just in terms of the wider Henry Boot group, now I did want to touch on the companies within Henry Boot PLC, and so moving from left to right on the screen, we have land promotion, property investment and development, and construction. And in simple terms, we can look at these as long-term prospects right through to the short-term prospects in terms of cash and revenue generation within the group business. So together, we're a resilient and balanced business created around the group structure with Hallam land, 17,000 acres and 90,000 plots, with a focus on the Southeast and Midlands. So that's our land promotion business. We have HBD, previously Henry Boot Developments, and Stonebridge. So HBD are are out looking at the medium-term prospects, I guess, with a programme of £450 million of developments, and 1 million square feet of industrial and logistics. For development, Stonebridge Homes is our premium house builder, which will retain a major shareholding, but those guys have got a focus in Yorkshire and the North East. We've got Banner Plant there, our plant hire brand, which is Yorkshire and Midlands focused. We have Roadlink, believe it or not, Henry Boot's associated with the A69, Carlisle to Hexham Road. We're the custodians of that, looking after it for the for Highways England, and we'll be looking to give it back in the next 6 years. The focus for the rest of the conversation is really about Henry Boot Construction. So in the top right there, so that little circle. So Henry Boot Construction is, getting the context, it's a £100 million business. We're consider ourselves as a mid-size with additional capability. Really, we're a regional construction services business, and we straddle the markets of what you might describe as occupied by the national tier ones and perhaps some of the smaller regional SMEs. So in terms of Henry Boot Construction operating area, this is our patch, and the dark blue is more of the routine fare, if you like. This is our heartland. When we start talking about frameworks, and I'll talk about expanding our geography and actually having an association with frameworks has allowed us to move into other geographical patches. So you could actually argue that we do deliver certainly from Midlands to the north of England's Scottish borders, which is a big patch. And currently we're delivering up in we just finished work in Lancaster, delivering outriders of work down in as far as Luton as well. But these are a little bit more unusual for us. These are our core areas of focus. And I just wanted to paint that picture of regional because it's quite important. Moving on very briefly, I'll just want to touch on market sectors that we operate in. And again, this is important because every business and everyone categorizes things slightly different. So I want to be quite clear on this one. And so I consider that we operate in 4 market sectors: urban development, low rise, industrial and logistics, and looking across frameworks, which could be a bundle of different stuff. And the next couple of slides will give you a bit of context as to what I mean by urban development and so forth. So here we are, market sectors, urban developments, a couple of images here for you. We're working on master plans at the minute. This is work for Sheffield City Council as part of Heart of the City, and we're doing £90 million worth of work there across 3 blocks, including residential, mixed-use, leisure, and public realm. Bottom image there is the glassworks in Barnsley. We've done over the past 5 years, delivered £150 million worth of town centre enhancement work, and this particular image is one of the library, a hub building there in Barnsley's market town, and part of the other works include multi-screen cinema, indoor market refurbishment, and a family entertainment centre. So urban development has been the mainstay of our business for the last 5 years certainly, and before that working on Fox Valley. We'll call it low rise in Henry Boot. You've got a couple of images of a care home in Newark and some social housing in Sheffield. Industrial logistics is, as you can guess by the title, sheds. So yes, very much part of what Henry Boot stands for, particularly in our developments business. But Henry Boot Construction does deliver warehouse and logistics. And these 2 images, one's I think is a Markham Vale at Junction 29 in the M1. And the image below is some work we did for a games workshop in Nottingham for all the games workshop nerds out there. Of course, the focus of today's chat is really about frameworks, and I think one of the key messages to come out from Henry Boot on frameworks is that they're not easily slotted into all these other market sectors that I'm talking about. And when we come to talk about frameworks, and particularly those where we're operating for or we're delivering for framework operators and end users, We've got quite a vast portfolio. And in this particular image, we've got we've got helicopter landing pad for the Northern General Hospital for Sheffield Teaching Hospitals. Got some public realm work there we did for converting Don Valley Stadium to the Olympic Legacy Park in Sheffield. And that image at the bottom, there's a new school, Access SEN School in Crewe, that we delivered for the Department for Education. So I think what this image is telling us here, that the framework operations that the pool that we swim in is quite vast, and the type of work is very different. Just wanted to briefly mention some of the sort of bigger brand frameworks, if you like, that we currently sit on. And this image shows a mix of framework operators and client-run frameworks. So at the top here, put the laser pen on for a second. We've got the regional Yorkshire and Humberside based frameworks. We've got the Pagabo and Procure Partnerships brands in there, the framework operators. We've got Leeds LEP, I'd consider very much as a client-run framework, along with these client-run frameworks, aside from Crown Commercial, of course, at the bottom. So a bit of a mix of regional and central government frameworks there. Spend a second on this one, and I think what this image is telling us, this is a little timeline of some of the frameworks that we've been involved in. And whilst it might not be everything, it's just an image to demonstrate that Henry Boot Construction has certainly been on the scene and got the T-shirt on frameworks over the last 15 years now. So we've got a big chunk of experience with Henry Boot business, and if we consider the modern framework and the guys that we're familiar with now, it's probably been about a 20-year life cycle. So we've certainly got the T-shirt, and for the size of business, and the frameworks have had a certain value to us, a certain presence in our daily work, and have certainly had some impact. Now, why is this image important? I thought this was quite an interesting stat, actually, when I was just crunching some numbers. Well, my viewpoint, the business's viewpoint, is going to be certainly biased towards the public sector, okay? And the public sector in terms of frameworks. Also gives you insight to the balance and complexity of the procurements that we might get involved in. But frameworks aren't, of course, the sole domain of the public sector, and I've certainly noticed an increase with more and more private sector clients looking to create and maintain frameworks. But I think it's fair to say that the private sector has looked towards the public sector for a blueprint in this matter. And finally, just in this introduction section, just wanted to, we talk about value, creating value from frameworks, and for sure, our revenues are most definitely impacted by our presence in frameworks. And in fact, 20% what we turned over or what we're going to turn over in 2021 will be as a consequence of framework operations. So they do create value for the Henry Boot Construction business. And this is very much part of our DNA. Okay. So let's go back to basics a little bit. What's a framework? And I had a look at a number of definitions. I thought this one kind of captured it in its most simplistic and pure form. So a framework is an agreement with one or more suppliers over a set period of time, which permits call-offs or contracts, if you like, of goods, services, or works to create discrete contracts. So frameworks are out there with one supplier, perhaps on a geographical lotting structure or even national. Some are up to perhaps 20 service providers. And I will make a mention here of DPS and dynamic purchasing system. And we don't need to go too far into those, but you can argue that they're somewhat looser framework concept, but could have potentially hundreds of suppliers on a framework. And I often just look at a framework as a club or a party. And let's have a think about the framework life cycle, because I want to drive into these in a little bit more detail. So it's about the procuring authority, or the client, on the left-hand side here, defining the need. So they need to come up with and get sign-off from the powers that be that they need to create a framework to deliver a service, or a series of projects, or buy some widgets. They need to establish this framework, and then they need to run the framework through framework governance and the procuring of contracts. And of course, frameworks don't last forever, so an opportunity to re-procure, go back to the start of the story, or close out and shut the shop. Just wanted to dive into a few of those in a little bit more detail. So thinking really from the framework operator or client perspective. So they need to define the need for this, or really why do the procuring authorities want to create frameworks? And a lot of them out there, of course, have different needs, different desires. I've put a few bullet points in here as to why they might want to do it. So reliable performance, and maybe want to create a framework of service providers, and they know that all of those service providers can perform what they need, and they have an opportunity to select from one of those providers. So they know that quality is driven in there. They might want to deploy a scheme or a series of projects quickly, and by having this framework, they don't need to go to open market again. So there's a time saving element there. Cost surety, and of course, frameworks may demand a level of cost fixed in them, or we may be asked as service providers to provide a schedule of rates or our overhead and profit aspirations, which might be fixed over a period of time. So there's cost surety to a point within that framework. Choice from the list of service providers, reduced administration for the procurement team on the client side for sure. And of course, that leads on to reduced procurement costs. And here's an odd one, which somebody might challenge, but increased competition. Well, if you have a framework of service providers, then you're limited to that set of competitors. Well, sometimes, and often, the converse can happen, because these limited competitors soon, start to pull their socks up a little bit during competition time with their closest rivals, who they know and love on the framework too. And of course, continuous improvement. So by having a set of providers delivering services, and the concept of repeat business would surely pave the way to an improved service down the line. Let's take a sip of water. And then establishing the brief, or establishing the framework, of course. Our clients are looking to formulate a brief. What is it that they want out of this framework, and how do they go about it? They need to access the marketplace. So formulating the brief is highly significant. They need to access the marketplace. And I've put examples here, or an open or restricted basis. So in an open tender process, combining one step into the framework where we can combine a pre-qualification and a tender process wrapped up in one, or indeed a restricted process where there can be a number of stages to create a short list of service providers that then turns into a tender list. And there's the setting of the competition. So mentioned that the SQ or selection questionnaire, or standardization questionnaires, some clients call it, ITT, the invitation to tender. And clients will look to create this competition, and perhaps there'll be some sort of behavioural assessment, an interview in the simplistic terms, or maybe even some sort of deeper audit where the framework provider or client will come to a place of work in offices, audit sites, or maybe even see how your team works together in the collaborative environment. And there's a process of appointing and inducting to establish the framework. So it's actually quite a big, complex process in some cases. I'm going to overlay in a minute or two what I think some good practice examples. Framework governance, and this runs in line, if we think about the image earlier on, in tandem with the letting of contracts. So framework governance, typically each framework will have a framework manager from the client side who will run the show. And moreover, it's their job to ensure pipeline and performance management. So in other words, the workflow coming through the framework, and how performance of the framework at maybe governance level and at project level might be operating through performance management through a set of KPIs. The framework manager from the client will be interested in risk management and market awareness, for sure. They'll be wanting to know a little bit about, or quite a lot about, the business resilience side of it and how they can service their customers. They'll also be very keen on best practice sharing and upskilling and within the community. So that's about framework providers sharing within the framework and possibly outside, and obviously also rather gives the framework a bit of airspace in the construction community too. Operating alongside this, and probably the mainstay of framework operations is in the procurement of contracts, which can be via a number of routes. And of course, getting onto framework is not a gift of work for service providers, and we've got to, in most cases, work hard for the work within them. So getting onto the framework's great. You get into the party, you've got to win work whilst you're on it in most cases. And these can be through everything from direct award, either single sourcing or a taxi rank. And a taxi rank system might be operated and as part of the performance management regime in the framework, where service providers perform well and they get to the top of the taxi rank and they get the opportunity to win more work. Further competition, which is the mainstay of frameworks, is not just about, certainly not, direct award isn't everything, and albeit is making more of an emergence in the current climate, but further competition has been the mainstay of frameworks for many years. And so, we all expect to have to tender for individual schemes and works. And of course, establishing contracts, isn't it? So, we can win or lose work, but those that are fortunate enough to pick something up, hopefully at the right value and the right program, will establish a contract and will go forward into that contract and be managed according to a performance management regime as established by the framework. So what I wanted to do is, just with that little bit of orientation there, we just sort of overlay some of the Henry Boot perspective in terms of what good looks like and what we consider as key elements to driving frameworks on both sides, really. So good likes, and in terms of going back to that establishing the framework piece, yes, of course, it must have fit with the business, the tendering entity. So you must have a fit with the market sector and the client. So number one, does it fit with your business? I think exposure to market testing, feedback and lessons learned is great when procuring authorities and framework operators issue PINs or prior information notices and come out to the marketplace to gain some feedback They may do this within the realm of the original framework or outside it. It's great that they share historical pipelines because it gives an opportunity to analyse that bid, no bid. And having a procurement relative to the opportunities, absolute sacrosanct. And we've all been, those that with experience of frameworks, we've all been there and got the t-shirt in terms of a massive competition, costly and long competition, which culminates in little to no work at the end. And this is very much part of the transforming public procurement mantra, and so something that's relevant to that opportunity. Something that limits barriers to entry, I think, for businesses that are capable. And we've all seen some frameworks out there which are hyper specific on specialisms, with little latitude to open doors for framework for new entrants. So the limitation and barriers to entry is key and very much part of the transforming procurement aspirations. Having a clear, brief, and comprehensive framework document would be delightful, I think, for everyone. And let's be honest, it's hard to achieve the perfect document, but we've all been subject to documents which are part baked and poorly thought through before they're released to the marketplace, and that culminates invariably in 1,000,001 tender queries from tenders, and a procurement that drives the right behaviours with the requisite balance on price and quality is absolutely sacrosanct, really. And actually, for those with the framework T-shirts, we've all seen the price quality splits in the competitions set by procuring authorities, and the price is moreover a race to the bottom. And the quality aspects may or may not actually tease out what the client really wants out of the framework. So a procurement that drives the right behaviours in the framework is absolutely key, and something we like to look forward to receiving. I want to mention this, a couple of, I suppose, best practice items within the old Henry Boot thought process. In terms of our bid, no bid strategy, considering longer term, one of my favourite phrases at the minute, business health. And I think frameworks can do that, whether they're specialist frameworks, specialist products, or outputs, schools or prisons or whatever, or whether you're looking for something else that dials into your business strategy and down the line. I think it's very important to be aware of that. I think we need to be aware of the public procurement overhaul, and with that I refer to the Transforming Public Procurement Green Paper and the National Procurement Policy Statement, which came out in June this year, which contains a little bit of a peek behind the curtain as to some of the changes in procurement that we're already starting to feel in some of the framework procurements. Quick mention of what good looks like in terms of framework governance. For us, it's all about effective, accessible, and communicative leadership. And without that, I think frameworks struggle to be impactful in many respects. So from the client side, accessible leadership, routine updates, team of people or individuals that can make decisions is important. Honest pipeline visibility, and this is probably one of the biggest bugbears in the history of operation of frameworks is pipeline visibility. But all we ask for is honesty, and if there's nothing there in the pipeline, there's nothing there, and we can move on. I think one of the challenges that we've got is that we do see opportunities arrive on pipelines which can sit there for months and years and never go anywhere. So that's not really helping anyone. Call it smart KPIs to promote the right behaviours. So key performance indicators. They need to be dialed in to the framework DNA? Do they promote the right behaviour amongst the framework fraternity? And of course, when we all think of construction KPIs, we're thinking about quality, cost, time, social value, partnering, all that kind of stuff. But really, they need to be driven down to the heart of the framework, and complete line of sight between the vision and values of the framework right to the rock face and to project delivery. And another bullet point there, equality of input and sharing from suppliers within the community. I think for those that have experience of frameworks and have had inputs to frameworks, it's often the same names and people that turn up to the meetings and make a contribution. And I think framework partners together, both clients and contractors, need to work a little bit harder to be more inclusive and drive a bit more sharing across the community. And just a little bit of blue bullet point there. So best practice, so supplier, so contractor, consultant, framework manager, investment relative to the framework opportunity. And I think the point I'm making here is that in terms of framework governance, there can often be a substantial drawdown in time and expense from service providers to be involved in the governance. And my view is certainly about dialing that into the framework opportunity itself and balancing those out. So in other words, what are we getting out of the framework and what are we putting in? And both will talk to each other. I'll leave that with you. In terms of procuring contracts within frameworks, we like to see an opportunity to review RFIs and EOIs. So in other words, requests for information and expressions of interest to inform procurements. So in other words, if there's something coming down the pipeline in the framework, the client reaches out to the framework service providers to let them know there's an opportunity up and coming, and gives them the opportunity to express interest or maybe even contribute to how that particular opportunity is procured within the framework. And that's the next bullet point, is about flexibility of approach within frameworks. I think is very significant. So ranging from the hallowed direct awards through single and two-stage approaches, and they're very much influenced by project type, requirement, design status, and perhaps market forces, which we're really experiencing now. And again, it goes back to one of my earlier statements about a procurement which is relative to the opportunity in hand. So, balancing competitiveness with the quality of outturn that the client desires needs to be balanced. And I'm going to finish this particular section off. One of the biggest influencing factors on some of our frameworks is consistency in evaluation. And this comes in where we have, we operate across areas in our patch, and working for the client will have different procuring teams around that geography. And the procuring teams have different ways of doing things, different ways of scoring tenders, and different ways of letting works. So, bigger teams and within frameworks, bigger procuring teams within frameworks creates inconsistencies. And our desire is to influence procuring authorities to bring that consistency and evaluation back to the fore. Okay, so that wraps up that particular section. I just wanted to, in fact, no, it doesn't. That little blue button that's just come up there. A little bit of advice for our listeners is, particularly if you're either client side or supplier side, is that drive for win or lose feedback. Irrespective if you win or lose a job, you need to get that feedback and create that 360 loop, feeding back to the client organization feeding back to the service provider for that full loop of continuous improvement. excuse me, quick drink. And finally, you know, the future of frameworks, a very simple slide here. They're here to stay, for sure. Frameworks are maturing, and they are becoming more impactful. You know, in other words, getting out what they originally aspired to achieve. There's certainly increasing competition between framework operators. There are frameworks, new frameworks on the scene. There are new operators on the scene, and there's a bit of competitive tension within the framework providers, which both, you know, open the doors to many public sector clients, particularly. I mentioned the influences from the Transforming Public Procurement and National Procurement Policy Statement, which there are a few sort of highlights in there, which, you know, for our frameworks, you know, should be front and center. And we're starting to see more DPSs, dynamic purchasing systems, on the scene now. And I recall the big Homes England one of which was announced a couple of weeks ago. So they're opening up a 10-year DPS for partners to join in. New regulations in place to replace the Public Contract Regulations 2015, of course, which some of us will know probably too intimately. But there are changes afoot to replace some of all of that and combine it with other regulations. MAT assessments. So used to be most economically. We're now on to the MAT. We've taken the economically out. So the focus is, in theory, moving away from cost. Flexible procedures to replace the previous OJU stuff. So we're now into find a tender land, aren't we, instead of the OJU, the official journal of the European Union. Flexible open frameworks as well. So shorter closed life cycles and opening these up to new entrants to define points. So in other words, you know, the 7 to 10 year frameworks are going to be a thing of the past, and we're going to be looking at shorter closed intervals now with more of a DPS sort of slant to them. Certainly foresee a decline in open tendering, and that's one of the sort of drives of the transforming public procurement. And, you know, something that colleagues on the call today will be aware of is the short to medium term view and what's happening out there, the economic recovery forcing quick to market opportunities through direct awards and two-stage tender processes. So we're starting to see a plethora of those. So quick to market, quick to site procurements. So Howard, that's my monologue over, and I've taken up a good chunk there, haven't I?
Yeah, I think we've got a number of questions that have come in. So probably we're not going to get through them all, Craig, I don't think. We could probably take a couple, but I wonder if we take these questions that we've got, we'll put them in an email to you, and if you answer them, then ensure that they do get out to everyone. Of course,
yeah, love to do that.
But let's just sort of close up on a few things, and I'd like to thank you very much. A very informative and in-depth look at frameworks. But before I begin to lose everyone, please don't forget to fill out today's feedback poll. Secondly, if you want, Abraham, I wonder if you could put this up on the screen. If you would like to get a CPD certificate for today, if you'd like to go to MyProPass and put in that code, you will then get a CPD certificate for today. And before anyone leaves, don't forget we have another session next week, and that looks on cross-shares lessons learned from safety reports. So please do register for that. So before we go, we'll take a couple of questions and see how we go, Craig. Okay, so the first one I've got is, what is in your experience the lifetime of a framework? I see someone on the chat has posted about 4 years. Is that your experience?
Oh, the life, well, yes. I mean, there's all sorts of life cycles going on. currently sit on one that's been extended numerous times, and certainly with the advent of the pandemic, the procuring authorities were allowed to through government sanctioning extend frameworks until this stuff settled down. So on average I would say 4 years. Some of them have been given extensions, 2 and 3 years. Crown Commercial Service, for example, operates up to 7 years. So I think 4 is a good one to operate on, Howard.
Okay, thanks very much. Before we go on to the next question, I'm going to go back to the chat because a few people have put things on the chat. John Simcox says, so what key aspect of the construction playbook do you consider essential for frameworks?
Okay, John. So I'm just going to turn the volume up a little bit on my computer, and I missed the last bit of the question there, Howard, if you just repeat it again.
What key aspect of the construction playbook do you consider essential for frameworks?
Oh, look, it's I think it should be absolutely hardwired to frameworks, and of course there's a big play on relevant and relative procurements, and I think from my perspective we must look to procuring authorities to be quite clear on the potential size of the opportunity, and actually clear on how they wish to procure opportunities through that framework. Now, this is a big drive for the construction playbook as well. Of course, the construction playbook talks to the transforming public procurements green paper. So I'll look at them as both fairly interlinked. And I've actually got here on my above my screen a bit of a flow chart for the construction playbook. We've got to remember that the construction playbook has a number of chapters, and by far the biggest chunk of those chapters is all about procurement and being ready and being prepared. Now, okay, admittedly, that might be more allied towards project procurement, but certainly for frameworks have got to take stock of the construction playbook. And the themes, social value themes, net zero carbon themes, MMC themes, need to be woven into the absolute root of all the aspirations.
Okay, I suppose it leads in, if we can answer this in the last 2 minutes, what in your view, because it leads on, I think, for the construction playbook, what in your view are the skill sets and capabilities required now and in the future? Okay.
Well, look, let's be clear here. There's going to be a mix of skills and capabilities required now and in the future. If we put it around frameworks, and of course we think of a framework as a specialist service, perhaps, where let's take, for example, we're looking at churning out specialist schools, and all those schools or prison blocks are all of a similar nature. Then that's opportunity to hone a specialism for sure. Other frameworks that are more generalistic don't necessarily require that specialism. But I'll tell you now, Howard, that the skills are changing, the skill sets are evolving. The creative, the innovative, process-driven skills are most definitely hot topics. Let's be honest, if we're talking about frameworks as well, and actually for businesses to be on frameworks or tenders to be on frameworks, framework operators are not 100% challenging our capability to deliver works on site. They're also challenging our capability to tender works. So I'll leave that for your listeners to stew over.
Okay, Craig, it is now 1 o'clock. People will start to tune out. So what I'm going to say is thank you very much. The questions that we have outstanding, which are about 5 or 6, if I send those to you, would you mind putting those onto a reply? And what we'll then do is send them out to everyone who attended today.
Of course, been my pleasure. So thank you, Howard, and thank you for everyone for tuning in.
Thank you very much. All I can say is have a great day. Enjoy the weekend, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And finally, thanks again to Craig. Bye.